So last time we took a look at the idea of generalized behavior change, the idea of taking a target behavior that was trained in an instructional setting and transferring it somehow to a different setting, typically into the real world. Well, today we're going to take a look at the 5 principles of promoting generalized behavior change, and number 3 will shock you. Actually, number 3 is not really going to shock you. They all pretty much make sense. So let's get going. My name is Dr. Igor Yurichevich, and this is Functional Analysis of Behavior 1. Let's go. All right, so last time we introduced the idea of generalized behavior change. So if you haven't seen that video, highly recommend that one over there. Give it a look. So just in a really quick kind of recap way, a generalized behavior change is a behavior change that lasts over time. It's used in relevant settings and situations, and it might be accompanied by other functionally related responses that develop. So basically, it's the idea of taking a behavior that was trained in an instructional setting and somehow generalizing it to other behaviors in other settings and other situations. And we took a look at the 3 basic forms of generalized behavior change, that being response maintenance, whether the response is maintained after training is terminated, setting situation generalization, does the behavior occur in different settings and different situations, and also response generalization, do you come up with new responses in order to achieve the same goals that the trained response was trained to achieve. So Cooper, Heron, and Heward mentioned that efforts to promote generalized behavior change will be enhanced by adhering to 5 guiding principles. So we're going to take a look at each of those 5 guiding principles in turn, and we are going to start with, number 1. So number 1, the first principle for enhancing generalized behavior change is to minimize the need for generalization as much as possible. So let's enhance generalization change by actually taking out the need for generalization. So how do we do this? Well, we do this by carefully analyzing the knowledge and skills that are most often required, those most important social behaviors that are required, and then training them as much as possible in the settings and situations where those skills are going to be the most beneficial. So, for example, if you were training somebody to learn how to use public transportation, let's say that you were training somebody to learn how to take public transportation to where they need to go. You would not want to treat them or train them in a situation that is not important to them. You would not want to train them in a setting or situation where the skills they learn in that setting are not going to be very beneficial. So if they never travel to the museum, you're not going to need you're not going to want to train them on how to travel to the museum. That's going to maximize the need for generalization. However, if they need to take public transportation to their college and you train them on that route, you train them how to get to that college using public transportation, well, then the need for generalization will be as minimum as you can do in this situation, and you will enhance generalization by minimizing the need for generalization. So basically, you're going to get extreme amounts of transfer to that relevant situation or that relevant setting because you have trained in that situation and setting, thereby taking the burden of generalization off of the learner. Okay, so guiding principle number 2 to promote generalized behavior change is to conduct generalization probes before, during, and after instruction. So let's say that we were doing our instruction on that using the public transit system to get to college. We were teaching this individual on how to use the public transportation to get to their college. We could do a probe before any training occurred. So we could say, hey, you know what? Do you know how to purchase a bus ticket? Let me take a probe before we give you any training to see what skills you are already bringing to this instructional setting. So the probes before can determine if the learner performs some or all of the needed behaviors in this setting. And then you can probe during the training for generalization. So once you train this person or begin training this person on how to use the public transportation, you might just probe for generalization during that training by taking them to a different bus station, taking them on a different route, and then asking them, hey, can you purchase a ticket at this bus station to see if their behaviors generalize? And then you can also do this after training. So once you have trained this individual on how to use the public transportation to get to their college, you might follow up months after instruction and see if they can do this again in a generalized setting. So not the instructional setting, but take them to a new station and ask them, hey, can you purchase a ticket in this new station, to see if generalization has occurred after the instruction has terminated. All right, guiding principle number 3 to promote generalized behavior change is to involve significant others whenever possible. So we are going to turn over to one of my favorite psychologists of all time, and this is Dr. Fox. And Dr. Fox has an excellent video. I highly suggest you seek it out. I'm going to put the link in the description below. And it is about treating a self-injurious individual, somebody who injures themselves, and the training procedure used to alleviate that problem behavior. So in a 1996 study, Dr. Fox said in programming successful behavior change interventions, 10% is knowing what to do, 90% is getting other people to do it. Many programs are unsuccessful because these percentages have been reversed. So that 90% getting other people to do it can be achieved by involving significant others as early as possible and involving significant others wherever possible. So when we talk about significant others, we are talking about the people in the real world that can help maintain and generalize this behavior change. So we are talking about parents. We are talking about friends. If somebody needs to generalize to a school, we're talking about teachers. We're talking about the staff that works in the cafeteria. If somebody needs to generalize something to work, we're talking about involving their bosses, involving their coworkers as much as possible. Involve the significant others in this person's life in their behavior change, and that will maximize their generalization of their behavior. And I can't say this any better than Dr. Fox, so let's turn to him, and we'll see what he had to say after successfully training Harry to no longer engage in his self-injurious behavior.
There's a major question that must be asked regarding any successful treatment program. Is the treatment effect maintained after the program is turned over to the staff and parents? In Harry's case, the answer was very gratifying. There is no mystery concerning why treatment programs such as Harry's succeed. Meaningful and long-lasting behavioral change occurs when a professional works directly with the staff and client during the initial program stages. When family, staff, and administrative cooperation is maximal, when everyone cares and commits to the program, and when the program remains flexible by evolving with the client's progress.
All right, so I can't say it any better than that. Involve significant others whenever possible. That is guiding principle number 3 for promoting generalized behavior change. Guiding principle number 4 for promoting generalized behavior change is to promote generalization with the least intrusive and least costly tactics possible. So least intrusive because we live in a social world and we don't want to intrude on other people's environments, on other people's situations, and least costly because we live in the real world and we can't always spend as much resources. We have limited resources in order to make this behavior change. So you want to promote generalization with the least intrusive, least costly tactics possible. So going and training at a real bus station when you're trying to teach somebody how to navigate the public transport system, that is intrusive. You are intruding into this environment. And that can be actually very costly to go out into the real world and train in real world settings. So you might look, or you would want to look, for alternatives to that. So maybe you can set up a mock bus station in your training setting. Maybe you can set up a little ticket booth that has many of the relevant features of a real world ticket booth. And that would be less intrusive. And it also could be less costly because you don't have to actually buy the passes or the tokens that are required for the behavior to be practiced. So this could be a less costly, less intrusive way of training that behavior. And then it would promote generalization because you are duplicating the relevant features. And then because those relevant features were duplicated, it would promote generalization because in the real world, those same features that you were duplicating would be present in the real world, such as the sign that they could see where the tickets were being sold. And then keep in mind very unintrusive tactics for behavior change. So for example, if you are in the real world, one of the least intrusive methods of promoting generalization is just to remind a person about the skills that they learned in the instructional setting. So if you're asking them, hey, can you purchase a bus ticket in this station? And they start to get flustered, they start to feel a little bit confused. You could just remind them, hey, do you remember what we practiced looking for? Do you remember what feature we were looking for? And that might remind them of the behavior and allow them to generalize that behavior in this new setting. So it's a very unintrusive way of promoting generalization. So keep that in mind. There are various techniques that you can use, such as reminding them, hey, we learned this in the institutional setting. Can you remember what we learned? And that would promote generalization, be highly unintrusive, and also very cost efficient way of promoting generalized behavior change. All right, so step number 5, the 5th guiding principle. This one is probably going to shock you, given what we just learned in step number 4. But here we go. Step number 5 says to contrive intervention tactics as needed to achieve important generalized outcomes. So we just talked about not being intrusive. We just talked about minimizing cost and minimizing intrusion. Number 5 is basically saying you want to promote generalization with the least intrusive, least costly tactics possible, but you want to promote generalized outcome. So the efforts to promote generalized behavior, if you need to contrive intervention tactics that are intrusive, if you need to contrive intervention tactics that are costly, make those intervention tactics as needed to achieve those important generalized outcomes. So in other words, if needed to achieve your goal of generalization, ignore number 4. So if you need to be intrusive in order to promote those generalized outcomes as much as legally possible and as much as ethically possible, be intrusive. Make sure that you are achieving those goals and not letting the minimization of intrusion or the minimization of cost prevent you from helping that individual learn those important behavior changes. So do guiding principle number 4, but if needed to achieve the goals as much as it's ethically and legally possible, do guiding behavior number 5, use those contrived intervention tactics or contrive those intervention tactics to achieve your generalized outcomes. So again, if you have to go out into the real world to generalize those outcomes, you go out into the real world to generalize those outcomes. It might cost a little bit more. It might be a little bit more intrusive, but if you need it to be done, then you design your intervention tactics to achieve that goal, and you go out into the real world and to achieve those generalization outcomes. All right, so today we took a look at generalization of behaviors, and we took a look at the 5 principles to promote generalized behavior. So we talked about generalized behavior in general, give a little brief recap, and then we talked about principle number 1, minimizing the need for generalization as much as possible. Principle number 2, conducting those probes both during, before, and after instruction. Principle number 3, my favorite, involve significant others whenever possible. Principle number 4, promote generalization with the least intrusive, least costly tactics possible. And then finally, principle number 5, contrive intervention tactics as needed to achieve important generalization outcomes. That is, when necessary, ignore principle number 4. So that is it for today's video, and that is actually it for this video series. So I want to thank you so much for joining me on this journey. Hopefully this has been helpful in your quest to become a behavior analyst or a registered behavior therapist, or just to understand functional analysis of behavior a little bit more. So I will be beginning a new series on behavior modification that builds on a lot of the concepts that we looked in these videos in the next few months. So until then, I've been Dr. Igor Yurichevich, and stay frosty, stay functional. And number 3 will shock you. Actually, it's not going to shock you. They all make pretty much sense. So let's get going. This is functional. Ah, that was a good take.